Okay guys, so we're here to talk about what to do on days 2 and 3 of your tunnel book. All right, so my dog is here. Hey Kevin, hey buddy. So yesterday you cut out your panels and you measured around them to create your borders that are all the same size. Again, I'm going to use 4 different panels for mine, so I cut 4. How many ever you're going to use for yours, you need to do at least 3. You can do as many as you want, but you need to do at least 3. I also made my accordion pieces, so I made them, 2 of them, and I made them identical. They're the same height as my book is going to be. And for each panel, I made sure that there is a V-fold. So I got 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4 V-folds in this. Same with this, they're the same. So today, what I want you to do for day 2 and 3, the first thing, you'll need to cut a piece of paper that is the same as your opening on one of these panels. So if you're going to consider this the border, the inside here is the opening. This is where we're going to see the art. So you need to cut a piece of paper that's the same size as that. So this is just a thin piece of copy paper. You can see it's the same size as the opening here, all right? What I started doing on this page was I sketched out my whole artwork, the Great Wave of Kanagawa, or the Great Wave off Kanagawa. And, you know, I took my time to note where I wanted my foreground, middle ground, background. I really worked hard. Say if I'm doing the copy version, I really want to work hard to get my proportions correct and to draw a copy of that artwork. If I'm doing the modernized version, I still want the artwork to be recognizable, but I can make some changes to make it more modern. So that's where you're going to need to be. The next thing you're going to want to do on days 2 and 3 is to create transfer paper on the back of your drawing. So the reason that we are doing that is because we want to transfer our artwork to our panels so that we can cut it out with an X-Acto blade. All right, so what you want to do to start off there is you are going to take a pencil and you are going to just scribble pretty closely together graphite onto the back of your drawing paper, okay? Move this out of the way just because I don't want anything to accidentally transfer. What this does is this turns your paper kind of into a piece of transfer paper. It's going to allow us to transfer the artwork that you made onto all of the 4 different panels that are going to compose your tunnel book. Ooh, dang. Don't get as gung-ho as me and end up, you know, wrinkling the paper like I just did. It's hard when you get to the edge to not wrinkle it. You don't have to cover every single millimeter of this paper, but you want your marks to be pretty close together. We're basically covering the back in graphite, and we're going to draw on the front, and that's going to transfer the graphite onto our new page, okay? So I've got this pretty well covered, and now I've got my first panel, okay? So this is going to be my foreground panel. So what I do is I put my artwork here, and I already told you guys I'm going to make my foreground this wave, up this boat, and up this way. Okay, so that's going to be my foreground. So how do I get this on this panel? All right, so I line it up. I line my artwork up so that it fits inside my window that I've created, inside the borders. The best thing to do here, and I'm not going to do it because I'm in a crunch for time. The best thing to do would be to put a little piece of tape up here so that you your artwork doesn't wiggle around while you're drawing, okay? I'm just gonna hold it really well with my hand, but if you've got time, go ahead and tape it. So now I am going to press down pretty hard over my foreground area sketch. My goal is to get the details transferred over. Okay. It's actually having the little pieces like this is kind of helpful because you know, if you accidentally do wiggle it a little bit, you know exactly where to line it back up. I'm gonna get as many details as I can down here. So that I will have all this work I kind of took the time to figure out in my sketching phase on my paper. I'm definitely going to have to still make some changes and things to it. Okay, there's my foreground. So I'm going to lift this up. So you can see it's very light. Let me show you a little closer. It's very light, but you can see it transferred my artwork enough that I can see it and sketch over it. There's just a little bit of graphite on there, but it makes it so I can really quickly go right over my sketch. And I know that it is going to be in the right proportion already. And I know that when I start to cut these things up, when I start to cut my pieces out, I know everything's gonna line up really well. Okay, so I just sketched over that a little bit so that you can see it a little bit more clearly. You will likely want to have more detail in it at this point, but for the sake of my demo, I'm gonna kind of simplify things so I can show you all of the components, okay? So that is my foreground. I am going to do another panel for my middle ground, one for my background, and then the last panel is going to be just plain, okay? Because that's just going to be my sky. So here's the one for my sky. I'm just going to put this back here. All right. So for my middle ground, I'm going to do the same. I'm going to line it up. My middle ground is going to be this boat and the Great Wave. And then my last panel is going to be Mount Fuji. So again, I'm going to line it up carefully with my border that I made. Better way to do this would put a little piece of tape at the top so it wouldn't move on you. Bust out the tape, you guys, so you don't have to worry about it moving on you. Okay, gotta get around all these details of the wave. Again, I'm pushing down pretty hard because I want to push the graphite that I've spread on the back of this paper. I want to push it onto this piece of, I want to push it onto this piece of folder, cardstock. Okay, so I can get in here too and I can get the little details inside. For the sake of the demo, I'm not going to do that, but if I was really doing this, I would take the time to do that. All right, so again, it's transferred really lightly. I can go over it and find my shape. There's my boat. And then my little people on the boat. Okay, so that's my middle ground, one mid-ground piece. So I've got now a foreground, middle ground, and then the next piece I need is Mount Fuji back here. So for this one, I'm gonna do the same thing. I'm gonna line up my panel, put my artwork in here. All right. Make sure it lines up inside my panel. And then I'm going to trace over Mount Fuji. For this last one, I'm just probably honestly gonna make sure to come down some, just so it goes below the layers before it. So I'm just gonna, I don't wanna go drastically and cut it off so it doesn't have any support, but I'm gonna just make sure my line that I'm making here dips down. Okay, so this is Mount Fuji with my extra lines that I added to give it some support. I was afraid that if I just went straight down, it would not give enough stability at the bottom, and it would make this piece wobbly. Okay. So that's what I want you guys to focus on doing for days 2 and 3. Make your sketch, get it transferred onto your paper. Okay guys, so the next step is to cut out your different panels. So you can see I've used an X-Acto blade. So you'll need an X-Acto blade or a box cutter to work with this. I told you earlier in this message you need one, and now's the time. So you can see I've got my panel, I've cut around the frame. This is my foreground, my second panel, my middle ground, and again I've left the frame so you can see how these stack on top of each other. The background, the very back one, is just going to be blank, so I'm not going to cut that, but I still need to cut my Mount Fuji panel, so I thought I'd show you how I do that. Okay. So with an X-Acto blade, these are sharp, you know, whether you're using an X-Acto blade or a box cutter. So you don't want to cut towards your hand. If you're holding it, make sure that you're holding it well away from your knife and that you're turning your paper so that you're not cutting towards your hand. So I'm going to cut out the shape of Mount Fuji first, and then I'm going to go around my edges and get my borders. You got to go slow for this, so really take your time. One thing I will say too is I'm cutting on top of a cutting board, not directly onto a table. If you don't have a cutting board like this, a piece of cardboard is fine. Just something to protect the surface you're cutting on. Again, you can see my hand is over here. It's not behind my blade. Really, when you get your hand behind your blade, that's when you run the risk of cutting yourself. So go slow. And don't put your hand behind your blade. I'm going to turn it as I need to so that I can hold my paper and not get my hand behind my blade. This doesn't, I mean, it takes a little bit of time, but this is something you can do easily in one day and even start on the coloring, because you still have to color it. Now I'm starting to cut around my frame. I want to take my time and make sure this cuts even. If you have no other option than a pair of scissors, depending on how intricate your design is, you might even be able to get at it with a pair of scissors. I think it's much easier to do with a box cutter or an X-Acto blade. So I would recommend, you know, getting one or the other. I think for myself, the X-Acto blade, it's easier to get in and get the more detailed areas with that than a box cutter. If you are using a box cutter, just make sure it's nice and sharp for you. Take your time. And just like the X-Acto blade, you do not want to get your hand behind your blade when you're cutting. Okay? So here's my Mount Fuji. Maybe I'll just put together the layers so you can see them together. So there's Mount Fuji, behind Mount Fuji, there's still going to be a layer of just background that I add color to. So on top of that, there's my wave. So that's part of my middle ground. And then I've got my foreground here. All right. Like I said, behind all of these, I've got one that I'm not gonna cut. That's gonna be solid. So that would slide under here. And it would just be my background. So I would color it. The next thing that you're going to want to do is you're going to want to add all of the color to your pieces. Do this before you try to put it together. Putting it together is the final step. You'll need a glue stick for that. But you want to add your color. You can use any color materials you like. If you are going to use watercolor, be careful about how much water you're adding. You don't want it to ripple your paper. I might use marker on mine, or even colored pencil, whatever I think I can get my best version of coloring for my artwork, that's what I'll use. I like the idea of doing marker, so I might do marker with mine.